education sector and skilling sector. And we are very interesting panelists in the panel. I will quickly introduce each one of them. So we have with us Professor Rajaram, ex-Joint Director of NCERT. Professor Rajaram. Welcome, Professor Rajaram. Then, yeah, good morning. We also have Professor Harish Chaudhary from IIT Delhi. Dr. Rekha from Northcap University.
Hi, good morning, everyone.
Good morning. And we are awaiting Sunil from AWS India to also join. As and when he comes in, I think he can also join. Let me just quickly set the agenda for this panel. So this is a 1 hour long panel. You can see very interesting and relevant panelists in this discussion. We will cover both K-12, higher ed, and to some extent skilling sector if Sunil also comes in terms of coverage. The format would be Q&A would be open ideally throughout with a chat or other mechanism throughout the panel. You can give name of the panelist and ask questions. I will be looking at those and in between butting in with those questions. And I would request panelists to first begin with 2 minutes introduction, talking about your area of work so that the audience understands what is your passion area, and 2 minutes each. And then we'll have close to 3-4 rounds of questions or conversation topics. And I would request each panelist to speak for 3 to 4 minutes, and so that we can do multiple rounds of questions and cover as much perspective as possible. I will now request Professor Rajaram to introduce himself. Over to you, Professor Rajaram.
Yeah, a very good morning to all of you. I have been associated with the school education sector all through my career, and at practically all stages of school education as well as teacher education. And over the last 2 decades, I was associated with the Central Institute of Educational Technology at the NCERT. NCERT perhaps does not require an introduction to anyone. This is a body which is vested with the responsibility of creating the curricular framework and all the educational resources that we generally consider as a part of the school education sector and the teacher education sector. Our institute was involved to begin with radio and television when it was instituted as a school television or a school radio interface in this country way back in the 1980s. And following that, we have moved into various other technologies, including video conferencing at a point in time when computer conferencing itself was not known. These were one-way audio, two-way video, and all kinds of combinations of technology. And of recent times, we have moved into digital technologies, offering online courses, offering digital versions of our media materials. So we have large repositories on the web which host audio, video, online courses, and the textbooks online. So our basically we have been experimenting with all these technologies more from the perspective of how it can be made effective for the end user. We haven't so much been, you cannot brand us as Edtech interface in any sense. We are more school education interface in that sense of it. Sure. And the primary interests of mine has always been of whether technologies or systems in the schooling system can be made more effective, made more efficient, whether the teacher can be relieved of a lot of burdens that she normally works with, and whether technology can play not a role of removing the teacher's identity in the class, but then forms a very good supplement for what the teacher can do in the class. Thank you.
Great. Harish sir?
Okay, since you asked me to come in before Rekha ma'am does, from Professor Rajaram Sharma, who's spent very rich years in school education, I have drifted into it. I am a professor at IIT Delhi in the Department of Management Studies, and been teaching various courses in management. Started from chemical engineering, which is my core discipline, for the last 3 decades. At the same time, last 11 years, I have been kind of attempting to understand school education and interacting more with school principals and teachers. That's my passion. My primary work is in values and value systems, which will not be the talk of the day because that really is outside the scope of Edtech, by and large. We'll talk of more mundane things like how to earn more money and how to become richer and how to pick up venture capital and how to increase profits, bottom line, top line. Because I just checked with Karan, and though he didn't give me numbers, but I understand there are not many educators in this conference here, primarily investors and IT tech people.
But
Sir,
just if I can come in, sir, but I would still say that, there are a lot of sessions on EdTech planned through the day. So this particular topic, we'll keep it at a level of education sector, skilling sector, and, you can talk about education related issues beyond EdTech in this particular session. And I would urge, because we have such a illustrious background, people from such a good background, I would request you to talk about also education sector at large, with EdTech being one small, one obviously now a significant part of it. And there are now multiple panels planned today. So I would request you to look at it from a wholesome perspective. And you can also talk about value education in that context.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay.
Over to you, Dr. Rekha. Over to you, Dr. Rekha.
Okay. Hi, good morning, everyone. And Manish, thank you so much for feeling privileged to be part of this panel discussion. Just a few words about myself. I am currently working as a Deputy Dean Academics and Associate Professor in the CSE department at Northcap University, and leading the Dean Office and the ERP related activities at NCU. At the Board of Management and at NCU, and also Member Secretary of Board of Studies here. I completed my PhD in the year 2000 and in the area of image processing. With an experience of 20 years and worked in industry also for 2 years, guiding PhD scholars in the area of signal and image processing. So basically, the Northcap University is a private university in the state of Haryana, that's in Gurgaon, and has an existence of over 25 years. There are 3 schools here: School of Engineering and Technology, Management, and Law. And we are now expanding new programs and going international, having new collaboration. We've recently tied up with the Arizona State University, and we'll be offering various new programs, including some online degrees. So I'm looking forward to talking about the education sector in today's panel. Thank you.
Great. So I will begin with the first round of discussion, which is about clearly education and all sectors, particularly education, can be divided into pre-pandemic and now post-pandemic phase. Pandemic is almost, I think, over. We can safely say that, maybe in coming 3-4 months' time. But pre and post-pandemic for sure. And I just like your comments, panel comment on what do you think has changed for good or will be changed for good, and what not so good, and your views about this particular topic, and from an education perspective, from a scaling sector perspective. Any one of you can begin. Dr. Rajaram?
Yeah. You see, till this shock to the education sector by suddenly removing teachers and students from classrooms and inserting a technology interface as the way in which we would communicate, it used to be a very great challenge to convince teachers that technology could make sense, that technology could be an add-on, that technology could be a good supplement, that technology could actually provide handles to the teacher for doing some things that she would otherwise not be able to. And There were certain core systemic issues which inhibited this. It was not so much about technology, but about the way we had always structured school education. And in fact, in the very design of school education curricula, we had made an assumption that technology would not be available to people, and therefore we always sort of made sure that it was precluded. And therefore, Edtech grew more as a kind of a supplementary. It started off with overhead projectors, it started off with multimedia projectors, it started off with let's say PPTs and so on. So essentially the model that we had posed in front of a teacher of what Edtech can do to classrooms, what it can support the teaching learning in the classroom, was a very limiting perspective. And most Edtech companies which had tried to sell anything through this period would have always bumped into this kind of a challenge, that though they managed to sell off a product, it would never see the kind of infusion that was required. Classrooms never got transformed as a consequence of technology. And therefore, we even to this date do not have a clear conception of how education technology can transform classes. There are a lot of beautiful products out there, but then most of these products are not the mainstay of what one would go about trying to sell as education technology. What the pandemic did was that suddenly it created a separation, a kind of a wall between the student and the teacher. And perhaps the most knee-jerk reactions that we have seen is in bridging this gap and creating some kind of an online interface. But what it has not done is try to transform the kind of delivery that will happen on it. Well, the delivery channel is still the online thing. So in general, if we speak to teachers, if we speak to heads of schools, if we speak to parents who are at the receiving end of this, most questions are about technology. Most questions are about connectivity. Most questions are about staring at a small smartphone interface. Most questions are about how can children be sitting for so long in front of the... these are systemic administrative issues. Nobody is really referring to what would happen on these channels and, how it would go about transforming it. Amongst the various opportunities that we have had over the last 6-8 months to speak to teachers, speak to school leaders about how you would leverage technology, we have always been referring to getting them to think in terms of, now that technology works, now that you can have this kind of an interface, whether it be in the classroom, whether it be at home, whether it be during class, whether it be after class, you have a possibility of letting loose children to explore things which are available there, of teachers taking on the responsibility of becoming some kind of a librarian, some kind of a curator of information, of a possibility of teaching children how crap that will naturally exist on the cyberspace be removed from or restricted to children, and how children can be made, we refer to maker space as if it is some kind of a physical gadget sitting in a lab. There is a great possibility of the internet itself evolving as a maker space. So rather than focusing on the communication possibilities of technology, rather than thinking in terms of online course or video conferencing, technologies of this kind, I believe there is a great scope for looking at interactive multimedia, which has transformed itself into all kinds of simulators, all kinds of other interfaces which allow children to create, which allow children to question, which allow children to plug in information and data from various other places, and then start asking the kinds of questions what we would have loved to happen in our classrooms, which thanks to the blackboard and the the textbook we were restricted from. I think technology has today opened out that possibility. So if at all we are looking at continuing our education to teachers of what technology can do, this would be some of those directions that we need to take.
Sure. So thanks.
Yes,
Let me quickly introduce Sunil to the panel. And Sunil, one line of introduction from you, and the question I just posed to the panel is about clearly education and skilling sector can be divided into pre-pandemic and post-pandemic phases, and your observation on it. We have a panel where which is represented by K-12 and higher ed audience, if you can also look at some bit of skilling in your, from an inside perspective, it would be good. Over to you, Sunil.
Hey, thank you. Sorry about joining late. Yeah,
No
I had some internet issues.
No problem.
Glad to meet you all. I'm Sunil. I run the education, nonprofit, and space as verticals for AWS, based in Bangalore. And on the question that Manish threw at me, I think we've seen a significant change over the last 12 months. 2020 was a very interesting year, and education and skills have gone through a significant change because of the pandemic. And since we manage a large number of education technology companies as customers, the view of the world that we've seen is significantly different, because we've had Edtech companies that have moved from 4 million users in April to 44 million users in August. Okay, so that's the scale of adoption that's happened. So that kind of scale, which have taken maybe 3 to 5 years, happened in 1 year. And that's the big change that we are seeing. So across board, all the edtechs, whether they are in the higher education space, K-12 space, whether it's a B2B edtechs, they're all seeing a significant change in adoption. What's interesting is that if you look at it, institutions in India largely were not automated. Automation of campuses, etc., was normally not high on the priority list. The pandemic has changed that demography completely. So we have a lot of automation happening, whether it's LMS adoption, ERP adoption, because now content is being created at quite large volumes. And therefore, there's a need for us to have a structured way to monitor that content being consumed and stored. So digital rights management has become a huge topic because there's a lot of content created by teachers. How do you manage that? So we're seeing that in the EdTech ecosystem largely, and we're looking at that becoming a huge player. We're also seeing a lot of virtual lab adoption happening. Okay, which is interesting because it's always been there. For the last couple of years, virtual labs as an option was always there. We've seen that taking off in a big way. So we have a lot of education campuses trying to get students to have lab time virtually on a cloud-based lab, and we've seen that adoption going significantly up. Another area that we are over the last 2 quarters is examinations. The automation of examinations again has been there for a long time, and the pandemic basically accelerated that in a big way. So we're seeing proctored examinations, remote proctored examinations happening at very large numbers. We have universities running like 400,000 exams a semester on an application that we have, which is a partner application. So we're seeing those kind of numbers happening. So it's interesting how the pandemic has changed the digitization wave in the education institution space, and that's driven a lot of changes. So teachers who are normally not comfortable with computers and technology have been forced to adopt it. So we see a lot of school teachers building fantastic content. Okay, and that content actually can compete with any of the private content available out there. We've seen teachers making some really great content. And they're also customizing their entire interaction for an online world, because it's no more that really the social interaction gets limited because of the virtual space. We're seeing them trying to do new things, like quizzing is becoming quite interesting, which was not there really in a real classroom. But virtually quizzing has become easier. So they're looking at quizzes and competitions virtually to get the interaction going up. So we're seeing a significant change, both in adoption of technology, usage, and consumption. Everything has changed in the last 12 months. So I keep telling people that what could have taken 3 years has taken 1 year. And that's the picture that we're seeing across segments.
Sure.
Thank you.
Professor Harish, we have heard a lot of good things about technology. Your perspective about not so good things also, and overall comments on how do you see pre and post pandemic from the sector perspective.
Well, one, technology cannot be resisted. Be that in the good old days, technology used to mean things like mechanical engineering, chemical engineering, textile. These days, it means internet. We are trying to invent another word for engineering, not to confuse it with what is called technology. Now, no technology can be resisted. That's my belief. But there will be resistance. There has been resistance. There was resistance to computerization in the banks. There was resistance to computerization in railways. There was resistance to television. There was resistance to automobiles, to aircrafts, maybe to electricity also. So it is here to stay, and I absolutely agree with Sunil. What may have taken 3 years, as a matter of fact, I would believe it would have taken more than that, maybe 5-6 years, has actually happened in 2020. 2, my wife is a school teacher, and I see her working about 14 to 16 hours a day. It used to be 8 to 9 hours when it was offline teaching. My schedule has gone totally haywire because she works till 2 o'clock in the morning, and I have to stay awake. Teachers have worked hard, they've adapted, they've adopted. The quality of teaching has improved significantly in the schools which I am seeing. The quality of learning, my belief is, has significantly gone down. For two reasons. In schools, especially the private schools, branded schools, attendance can be mandated. I am teaching, if I may call it teaching, 2 courses at IIT, which we normally do, and I have a class later in the evening today. My students love switching off the cameras. And when I call them by name, it normally takes a few minutes for some of them to reappear, which tells me that they are not in that physical space, they are somewhere else, but they have somebody or they have some kind of mechanism to listen when the name is being called out. By and large, they do reappear, but it leaves me feeling very hollow. To the quality of interaction with the students, though more systematized now in online classes, so we call them out by name and they switch on their mic and more disciplined, but the cross discussion has significantly gone down. We are not able to really hold group discussions even when we have small rooms, side steps. 3, I did my engineering ages back, so I'm totally outdated at IIT Kanpur, and we didn't attend classes because more learning happened in the hostels post-dinner when we did our assignments in groups and copied from each other and fought what we hadn't understood than what happened in the classroom. Now, there's a lot of research, and maybe Rekha ma'am could help me understand that, but there's probably a lot of research which says that up to 20% learning can actually happen in the classroom if it is well taught. The rest of it happens out in the classroom. So, I'll go back to the basics. It was Dr. Radhakrishnan who said there are 2 kinds of education. One which teaches you how to earn a living, and the other which teaches you how to live. When it comes to earning a living, the skills part, we at IIT are feeling a gap. Yes, virtual labs, great idea. But somehow we are not fully convinced about it. We are not fully convinced about the efficacy. It's just like in management, we do simulation games. That you have a certain amount of money and you set up a company. I went through that whole process for a couple of weeks when I was doing my courses in ERP. But when it's your own hard-earned money, the thought process changes. So we have recently moved from courses in finance to courses in behavioral finance. The second big issue to me is assessments. Yes, there is talk about proctored examinations and universities conducting large-scale examinations. But once again, in my institute, we are extremely wary of it. We are not convinced at the moment, and I would love to connect with Sunil on this later. In our institute, and we have a very strong, if I may say, one of the, at least in perception, one of the highest rated computer science department, computer services department, computer engineering department, 3 of them. We are not convinced about this online examinations. Now, given that, 1, technology is here to stay. 2, even when the schools open up, there will be blended education. 3, the content needs a lot more. There are 2 aspects to it. One is there the best physics teacher who can develop the material and that can be used by the, let's say, not so brilliant or not so experienced physics teachers, and they use it. So there will be globalization. We haven't reached the end of content with extra marks or with EduComp or with IYC or with, Khan Academy and so on. So there will be going to lot. At the same time, it's a challenge for startups because the moment you say content is free, how do you carry on your business? The second big challenge and also the opportunity is personalization. Technology allows us to personalize a lot more using AI, using ML, and drive relevant content to the relevant child, because if I look at the history of education, it's moved from one-to-one to mass customization. Now we have an opportunity for personalization.
Yeah.
3, I think there's a lot more that can be done and needs to be done on assessments. So these to me are the challenges, and these to me are the areas which the tech companies could look at. The big thing to me is going to be learning. How do we ensure quality of learning, especially social emotional learning?
Yeah.
Because the more we move with it, if we don't address that, we run the risk, and that would be disaster. You see,
So, sir, that is my next round of questions. So, if you can just hold your thoughts on SEL.
one last comment.
Sure.
We don't want human beings to become computers and think like computers.
True.
Can we get the computers to behave and think like human beings?
Sure.
So that's a hardware challenge. So that's where I am and I come from. Over to you, Manish.
Great. Very well summarized, sir. Very well summarized. Dr. Rekha, your views on this?
Okay, so thank you, Manish. And on one hand, I do agree what Mr. Sunil has mentioned about the technology and how teachers and students are adapted to it. And but yes, I cannot deny what Professor Harish has mentioned. Education, the best education happens face to face, and the emotions, the intent has to be shown. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to talk some figures now, giving you a bird's eye view of the large education sector that is in India. So basically, though India has close to around 40,000 colleges and around 1,000 universities, with 38 million students, enrollment rate is less than 30%. So India has a long way to go. It's become the second largest market of e-learning after the US. And e-learning sector is expected to reach, maybe around $2 billion very soon, 9.5 million users. And yes, COVID has played a large role in this, making e-learning sector such a large sector now. The foreign direct investment in India has, in one quarter, it was around $3.29 billion. The April to June 2020 quarter, if you look at the numbers of that quarter. And Edtech market which is the focus of the summit right now, is set to hit around $3.5 billion by 2022. So amidst all of these opportunities, the Indian government has done its part, has walked the talk. The major initiatives with the Indian government has, taken are providing DTH education, the TV channels to homes, even to remote places. It's implemented the STARS project, that is strengthening teaching, learning, and results. It's working on another project that's called the RISE project, which is revitalizing infrastructure and systems in education. Maybe it'll take some shape by 2022. New IITs and IIMs have opened up, and of course, there are many more steps which the government has taken. However, a report by McKinsey highlighted the fact that as many as 87% of surveyed executives said that their organizations were neither experiencing skill gaps or experiencing skill gaps, and it's expected to happen within the next few years. And the pandemic has worsened this gap and put a spotlight on the need to reskill and upskill professionals across the sectors. So what's the road ahead? And there are a lot of targets which has been set for the education sector. Let's say a target of next 10 years. So by 2030, it is estimated that India's higher education will adopt transformative and innovative approaches. The gross enrollment rate, which was 30%, is going to rise to 50%. That's the target set for next 10 years. India will emerge as the single largest provider for global talent, with 1 in 2 graduates in the world being a product of the Indian higher education. Of course, research is going to take a new shape with the establishment of National Research Foundation by the government. And yes, we do intend to look many more universities, Indian universities among the top global 200. As of now, we have only 3. So what are the key drivers for this progress? So basically, the education policy changed in 2020, on-demand skills, B2B industry academia collaborations, industry, academia, placement strategies. These are the three drivers. The National Education Policy 2020 proposed in June 2020 includes amendment to the Apprenticeship Act and allocating, around 3,000 crores for the alignment of existing schemes. Initiatives to partnership with countries abroad, setting up a higher education commission, setting up multidisciplinary education across universities, and enhanced focus to online learning, internationalization, and holistic development of the students. So these were a few, pointers for National Education Policy 2020. But just proposing the policy and not allocating enough funds and resources towards it, and supporting it with education infrastructure would just leave NEP on papers. So to understand true meaning of Atmanirbhar Bharat and to achieve this goal, we have no choice but to strengthen our education sector. Thank you. Thank you for listening.
Sure. I can see now that the counter has emerged. The countdown timer has emerged. I think we can do probably one more round and quick round, 2 minutes each from all of you on the aspect of this whole area of non-curriculum, 21st century skills, social emotional learning, an aspect that are not directly linked to curriculum. And obviously NEP has mentioned about it, but we still don't see enough action anywhere, serious action in terms of real thing happening on these fronts. So Sunil, you want to quickly begin talking about, are you seeing any traction on these aspects in the sector, or it's largely right now curriculum linked, degree focused initiatives?
No. I think it's a cultural thing, right? We are largely an examination result oriented country. We love that. That's how we've been. So that change is going to be a gradual change. So if you look at the Atal Innovation Missions, Atal Tinkering Labs, it's been there for some time. 5,000 schools are there. I keep looking at that as an example because that's an attempt to try and create creative skills within the school curriculum, outside of a conventional curriculum, which is, whether it's working or not is a question we can always ask. But that's an effort. And these efforts are going on. So the Innovation Center, the Tinkering Labs, we also have an interesting project going on trying to get curriculum on AI, ML embedded quite early in schooling. Okay, I don't know how effective that's going to be. But the intent really was to try and add as much of creative skills we can for kids going through the schooling process. That's the intent that's there. And the government's policy also is aligned to that. You see that the NEP has a fairly large amount of talk around additional skills going in at a very early stage in schooling, which was not there earlier, which is great. But that's going to be a gradual change. It's not going to change suddenly, but there is a gradual change. It's going to take some time for happening.
Professor Rajaram?
I would like to flag a issue here, which is very systemic to the school education sector, and it is not going to be wished away. Irrespective of how you configure this whole curriculum, the very design of this curriculum is that someone is going to deliver something to someone else, and that someone else is going to be a receiver of this. This very model will have to change if you believe that the technology, particularly resources available on the internet, resources available in whatever form, can be meaningful to students. This whole thing about the examination driving it or whatever are symptoms of the problem. The problem is that there is no premium whatsoever on equipping a student to become a learner, a student to become an autonomous learner, a student to become someone who is going to drive this whole initiative of what I want to learn, how I want to learn, what resources will I seek, and how I will question resources that exist and reject bad resources. We will still remain a complete supply-dominated interface if we continue to not lay adequate emphasis on students' capabilities of interfacing with resources, interacting with resources. What is currently not happening, and we suddenly believe that somewhere post high school or post secondary education we will try and bridge this gap. Whether you call it a life skills program, you call it a communication skills program, you call it whatever skilling program, the seeds of that are not sown. The seeds of that are language and mathematics. The capabilities of children in language cannot be bridged in high school. They have to be bridged very early on. Children are today incapable of thinking on their own. of processing there is enough and plenty information available there, but to make sense of that information, to build something called a crap detector would be the essential ingredient of this kind of a process. If children do not possess that, all we are going to do is create a lot more interfaces where everybody is going to start seeking jobs and become workers. Yeah. Yes, we are going to create those interfaces very well, but I believe to really benefit from technology, really benefit from the possibilities of ICT, it requires that we lay enormous emphasis on how students are going to be liberated from this information delivery kind of model. Children are challenged, children are forced to start thinking on their own. And by the time that they become capable, let's say post-adolescence, they actually take the initiative of seeking information, of acting on that information. The Tinker Lab is only going to sort of show what the systemic faults of that system is. So a Tinker Lab, the success of a Tinker Lab to me would be that children are actually be able to use that for creatively interacting with it and creatively producing things out of it. Yeah.
Professor Harish?
5 minutes, 17 seconds by the ticker, so I'll take 1 minute.
2 minutes.
I totally agree with Sunil, sir. It's a cultural issue. We have been a hierarchical society. We have been a competitive society. Long back, it was Bertrand Russell who wrote, "Excellent education will result in degradation of the society." Because at that point of time, excellent education meant pushing the state doctrine and making conformists out of people. And they said conformism will result in degradation. So great, we're talking about creativity, art integration, critical thinking, competency-based learning. We have always been brilliant in planning. It is the monitoring and implementation. And as Rekha ma'am said, put resources behind it. My only request is, let's also take into account what is our monitoring mechanism, or will it die the way CC died, or will it die the way Vidya Vahini died? Thank you.
Rekha ma'am.
All right. So basically, what I think is, education is not just a development of intellectual intelligence. It's a combination. It's a healthy combination of intellectual intelligence, emotional intelligence, moral values, creativity, and skill. And first and foremost, the very thought of monitoring the psychological well-being of students needs to be appreciated in our country. There's always been a taboo. It's very difficult for kids to explain what they're going through, especially giving a name to the emotions, what they experience, whether it's lack of confidence or hope or guilt or anxiety. It's very difficult for them to name them. And also on top of it, we need to, tell them, teach them how to cope with those emotions. And of course, COVID has not helped us at all in this. So all stakeholders, parents, psychologists, teachers, school counselors, their peer groups, even the government need to come forward and do something about this. Opening up online portals, supportive talking, problem solving. NEP 2020 also has something in store for students' mental health. Simple things like lesser school days, no bag days might help reduce stress on the students. However, all of these can happen only if the policy is implemented in the right way by all the schools across the length and the breadth of the country, and every stakeholder plays its role diligently. Let's hope that talking about mental issues and health are no more a taboo in the country. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think it can be a half a minute rapid round with all of you. 2 things you will do if you become the education minister for coming 5 years, and we can begin quickly. Professor Rajaram.
Yeah, I would. Well, I'm deliberately sort of hiding all the lack of capabilities in the system. But as an education minister, I would do away with textbooks. The internet being there is going to provide adequate access to all kinds of information resources. But how to, and then I would drive the possibility that the entire curricula is actually going to train people to mine information from here, learn how to navigate that cyberspace, and so on.
Sure. Sunil?
Yeah.
Quickly.
The quick thing would be to try and bring the joy back in learning. I think that's missing. That's the one thing that I think we should drive for.
Prof. Harish?
Teacher training and reserving at least 2 Padam fees for teachers.
Dr. Rekha?
Yeah, I think more focus on the holistic development of the students and good balance of extracurricular, co-curricular activities.
Okay, great. It has been a wonderful discussion, and sorry about this timer. You can't, you have to be strict about the timing, but obviously it creates pressure while talking. I once again thank all the panelists who come in and share their views on this topic. We were not able to take Q&A. You guys can post your question and answers in the Q&A. We can probably get back to you on that. Please stay tuned for the next session, which is again we're delving deeper into the subject of how K-12 and higher education institutions are adapting to the new normal post-pandemic. Thank you all once again. See you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.